I buried my husband 6 months ago. Yesterday I saw him alive, standing in a grocery store aisle, holding a basket like it was any ordinary Tuesday. For 6 months, I had done everything a widow is supposed to do. I visited the grave every Sunday. I kept his coffee mug on the shelf, because moving it felt like erasing him. I slept on my side of the bed because the other side still smelled like him for the first few weeks, and then it didn't, and that was its own kind of grief. I had learned to answer the phone without expecting his name on the screen. I had learned to cook for one. I had learned, or thought I had learned, how to carry the specific weight of losing Richard. That Thursday started like any other. I needed milk and bread, and the ordinary things that keep a house running even when the person you built it with is gone. I was standing in the cereal aisle comparing prices I didn't care about, just to have something to do with my hands, when I heard a laugh 3 rows over. I stopped moving. It wasn't just any laugh. It was low and a little too loud at the end, the kind of laugh that used to fill our kitchen on Sunday mornings. I told myself it was a coincidence. Grief plays tricks. I had read that somewhere in one of the pamphlets the hospice counselor gave me. Grief plays tricks on the senses. I stood there gripping the shopping cart, willing myself to keep moving, to just get the bread and go home. But my feet turned the corner instead. And there he was, Richard, older somehow, though it had only been 6 months. A little more gray at the temples. But it was him, the same slight slouch in his left shoulder from the rotator cuff injury he never got fixed, the same habit of tapping 2 fingers against his jaw when he was deciding between brands. I would have known that tapping anywhere in any life. The basket slipped from my hand. It didn't shatter, just clattered against the tile, spilling a box of pasta and a jar of peanut butter across the floor. He turned toward the sound the way anyone would. For one unbearable second, I waited for his face to open the way it always did when he saw me, the way it had for 11 years. Instead, his eyebrows drew together in polite confusion. "Richard," I said, and his name came out smaller than I meant it to. "I'm sorry," he said, already stepping back half a pace. "I think you had me confused with someone." The words didn't land as words first. They landed as a kind of static behind my eyes. I remember thinking distantly that this was a moment I finally understood the phrase "the ground fell away." "No," I said. "No, it's me. It's Margaret." Something crossed his face when I said my name, a flicker there and gone, like a light behind a curtain. Then it was smooth again. "My name is David," he said carefully, "the way you speak to someone you think might be unwell. David Ferris. I really am sorry." His voice, that voice had told me he loved me on the morning of our wedding, at 3 in the afternoon during ordinary arguments about grocery lists, and, I had believed, from a hospital bed on the last night, I was allowed to hold his hand. It was unmistakably his. I reached for my phone with fingers that wouldn't quite cooperate and pulled up a photo. The 2 of us at his sister's wedding, his arms slung around my shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. "Look," I said, holding it up between us like evidence in a trial I hadn't known I was part of. "Do you remember this? You said the DJ ruined your song and made me dance to it twice to make up for it." His eyes moved to the screen. For a fraction of a second, something tightened at the corner of his jaw, the exact place it always tightened when he was hiding something and trying not to show it. Then he shook his head, slow and final. "I've never seen this photo," he said. "You should sit down. Do you want me to call someone for you?" He reached out and put a hand on my shoulder, and it was the same hand, the same warmth, the same precise weight he always used when he was trying to calm me down after a bad day. My knees nearly gave out. I looked down instead of at his face. "Show me your left hand," I said. He frowned, but he lifted it anyway, humoring what he clearly believed was a grieving stranger having a breakdown in a grocery store. There it was, the small white scar crossed 2 knuckles from a fence he'd fixed the summer before we got engaged. I had kissed that scar more times than I could count. His face changed. Just slightly. Just enough. "I have to go," he said. "Too fast now." Already turned the cart away from me. "I hope you feel better." And then he walked away, and I stood there in a wreckage of spilled pasta while an employee crouched down to clean up around my feet, murmuring that it was all right, ma'am. These things happen. while a woman nearby whispered to her friend that the poor thing must be having some kind of episode. She was wrong about the word poor. What I was standing there was something closer to certain, because underneath the shock, one thought had already started clawing its way to the surface, louder than 6 months of grief had ever managed to be. If Richard was alive, walking and laughing and flinching at his own scars in a grocery store 2 towns over, then whose body had I lowered into the ground beside my mother's roses. And I understood, standing in that aisle with a shattered jar of peanut butter at my feet, that whatever answer I found was going to break my life open in a way even his death hadn't managed to do. I should have gone home. I should have called my sister or my doctor, or simply told myself that grief, given enough time, breaks something in everyone. That would have been the easier story. I didn't leave. I watched him from the end of the aisle while he paid, cash, folded and pressed flat with his thumb the exact way he always had, though Richard had always insisted on cards, complaining about carrying receipts. I felt something crack open in my chest at that small, stupid detail. A man could change his name. He could apparently even fake his own death. But some habits, it seemed, were louder than any new identity. I followed him to the parking lot, keeping my distance, feeling ridiculous and clear-headed all at once. He loaded his bags into an old gray sedan, nothing like the car he used to drive, but the way he set them down, heavy items first, bread balanced carefully on top, was so familiar it made my throat close. I memorized the plate without deciding to. Then I got into my own car, the one he bought me 2 years before the accident because he wanted me to have something reliable, and I followed him. We drove through neighborhoods I didn't recognize, past streets that grew quieter and greener the further we went, until he pulled up outside a small house painted a soft yellow, with a porch swing and a garden known by the mailbox. The kind of house that looked like it had never known a single day of tragedy. The front door opened before he reached it. A woman stepped out, maybe a few years younger than me, dark hair pulled into a loose bun, wearing an apron dusted with flour. She smiled at him, not politely, but the way you smile at someone you build a life with, and took one of the grocery bags from his hands. Then a small boy ran out behind her, no older than 5, shouting "Daddy," before Richard even reached the steps. "Daddy." I sat frozen in my car at the curb, watching my husband, my dead husband, scoop up a child I had never known existed and press a kiss to the top of his head. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light to shift and for the tears sliding down my face to finally register as tears and not just some strange numbness leaking out of me. I took out my phone with shaking hands and started taking pictures. The house, the car, the plate, the 3 of them disappearing inside, the door closing on a life that had apparently been running in parallel to my grief this entire time. When I finally drove home, I don't remember the roads. I only remember sitting in my driveway afterward with the engine off, staring at the photos, zooming in again and again on his face, looking for the scene where the stranger ended and my husband began. There wasn't one. It was him. Every line of him. And underneath the devastation, a single question kept surfacing sharper each time. If Richard was alive and building a new life 2 towns over, then who had I buried? And who had helped him disappear? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the photo album spread open beside my phone, comparing every scar, every mole, every small imperfection between the man from that afternoon and the man I had married. They matched, every single one. At 3:30 in the morning, I called my daughter. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Mom, what's wrong? I need you to come over." "Mom, it's the middle of the night. I saw your father today." I said, "Alive." The silence on the other end lasted just a beat too long. Not confusion. Something closer to dread. "Mom," she said carefully, "we've talked about this. Grief does strange." I followed him home, Claire. I saw his house. I saw his son. Another silence. Longer this time. And in that silence, I understood with a cold certainty that settled into my bones that my daughter was not going to ask me if I was sure. She was going to ask me how much I already knew. "Stay there," she said finally, her voice unsteady in a way I had never heard before. "Don't go anywhere. I'm coming." When she arrived 20 minutes later, she didn't say a word. She sat down across from me at the table, looked at the photograph spread between us, and her face did something I will never forget. It broke. "Mom," she whispered, "I am so sorry." Those words did more damage than anything Richard Stranger's face had done in that grocery store. Because sorry meant she knew. Sorry meant this had never been grief playing tricks on me at all. "Tell me everything," I said, "right now." And as my daughter began to speak, I understood that the man I had mourned for 6 months was the least surprising part of what I was about to learn.